Hello, my name is Craig Cawthorne and I'm one of the founders of Culture Stretch, and today I'm going to take you through our 5 behaviours team development showcase. So let's dive into the agenda. So first of all, we're going to introduce you to the 5 behaviours team development process and product, and then we'll look at creating cohesive teams in your organisation. We'll do a quick summary just to recap what we've gone through over the course of the session, and then hopefully by then you'll have all the answers you need to decide whether you feel this is a solution that's right for your team or for your organisation. This is Patrick Lencioni, and this is one of his kind of staple phrases: not finance, not strategy, not technology. It's teamwork that remains the ultimate competitive advantage, because it's so rare and so powerful, or so powerful and so rare. I really believe in that statement. I've been running this process with senior leadership teams for the last 7 or 8 years. I've done it in some fairly large organisations and smaller ones, but the results are pretty common. The reality is that leadership teams, or teams in general, don't truly understand what it takes to work together cohesively and create high performance. And a model like this and a learning development system, a tool like this, really helps codify what it takes to become truly successful. This is the book that the process is based upon. It's the 5 dysfunctions of a team. It's a fable that Patrick wrote some years ago. It sold millions of copies worldwide. If you haven't got a copy, grab one. If you're a leader of any description, this book is hugely helpful in understanding and helping you understand how to become or how to build more successful teams. It's a really worthwhile read. And he's had lots of accolades for the work that he's done, both the books that he's read, but also the work that he does with his organisation called The Table Group. He's run the 5 behaviours process with organisations as large as Google. So he's kind of got the evidence to prove that the process that he's built really works. Back a few years ago, Wiley, who have a workplace solutions division, reached out to Patrick's team and said that they wanted to build a solution together. And that's where this process has come from. So we take the learnings from the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and we add to that a personality profile called an everything DISC profile, which really helps people understand how to perform on a team and how to understand themselves and each other more effectively. And I'll take you through how that works in a bit more detail over the next few slides. So what if there was a way to measure if a team trusts one another, engages in healthy conflict around ideas, commits to decisions, holds one another accountable, and focuses on achieving collective results? I think that's singularly one of the reasons why this process really stands out, is it does have the ability for you to measure and monitor the current cohesion of your team, and it also allows you to measure the progress throughout the use of this particular solution. It's singularly the most powerful learning development solution I've either ever delivered or been involved in as a participant. It has a really powerful impact on a group.
Since we were little, we've been thrown on one team after another. Soccer teams, project teams, work teams, you name it. And even though we have lots of experience being on teams, the only advice we've ever been given about how to be a good teammate is to play nice and everything will work out. But what if it doesn't? What if people spend more time politicking and posturing? What if people can't agree on which direction to take, so they go nowhere? What if everyone is just looking out for themselves? Turns out there's more to good teamwork than just playing nice. That's where the 5 behaviors comes in. Based on Patrick Lencioni's New York Times best-selling book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, this simple but powerful model consists of 5 behaviors that people can master to become a better teammate and to start building stronger teams. Here's Patrick to explain those behaviors.
There are 5 behaviors that all teams have to master to become true functional teams. The first is trust. Team members have to trust one another, which means they're vulnerable with one another. Vulnerability, which I think is one of the most important characteristics any human being can embrace in life, is nothing but admitting who you are as a person. It means they're capable of being completely honest and human with one another. That's important because it enables them to embrace the second behavior, which is conflict. Yes, conflict. When people are vulnerable and trustworthy with one another, they'll engage in conflict without fear. They'll debate issues, and they'll be totally upfront with one another. As a result of that, they'll be able to embrace the third behavior, which is commitment. They'll commit actively to decisions, and they'll leave the room on the same page, totally committed to follow through on what they've agreed to. That commitment will give them the courage to hold each other accountable, knowing that they're doing nothing but reminding each other about what they've intended to do from the beginning. And that accountability will ensure that they get results, that they're focused on the collective results of the team and not their individual needs.
So it starts with trust, it goes to conflict, commitment, accountability, and ultimately, results. That's it.
Now, ironically, it's not that complicated to build a team. It's pretty simple in theory, but it is hard because it requires a lot of work over time and a lot of courage. But it's worth it because the benefits of a great team are truly extraordinary.
And it all starts with you. Teams are made up of individuals, after all, and every individual has a part to play in making them stronger and more cohesive. It's how we get back to those teams that were fun and fulfilling, and we couldn't wait to be a part of.
Okay, so a quick overview there, and hopefully Patrick's given some real indicators as to what these behaviours are all about. So let's just briefly look at the dysfunctions of a team model, which is where the book originally focused. Dysfunction 1, absence of trust, into a fear of conflict, through to a lack of commitment, an avoidance of accountability, and then an inattention to results. And we'll go through those in a more positive frame as we go through the model. But it gives you a really clear indication of the kind of problems that teams typically see. Understanding each team member's behaviour. So as part of the development of trust, the DISC model, which is taken as part of the process, or the DISC assessment, which is taken as part of the process, really helps team members start to understand each other's behaviours and start to understand each other's needs. And I see this quite a lot in organisations where there's a real failure to understand and interpret the different behaviour types within a group and to really appreciate those. And you can see here, using some of the keywords that we use in a DISC assessment, how different individuals react and how, from a behavioural perspective, what they're looking for in an organisation or in a teamwork setting is really different. So over on the left there, somebody's really seeking harmony. Next to that lady is a chap that's really seeking acceptance. He wants to be accepted as part of the group. Somebody else wants action, and somebody else is looking purely for facts. And so these differences in behaviour can create an environment where it's quite difficult to develop and build trust unless you truly appreciate these differences, because quite often it leads to scepticism around people's agendas and what they're actually trying to achieve in a teamwork setting. It's probably at the heart of quite a lot of the political issues that I see, particularly in senior leadership teams, where they fail to understand each other's perspective. So that's the 5 behaviours model, and that's what we're ultimately trying to build, a team that trusts one another, engages in conflict, and then moving through those different behaviours till eventually finish up on a focus on collective results. And we'll take you through those in a little bit more detail now. There's one assessment, but with 2 parts to it. So each team member will have to take an assessment, and that assessment does 2 things. The first is an individual DISC style assessment for the reasons already discussed on the previous slides, to help us understand the personality types of the different people within a team or a group. And then the second aspect is some specific and detailed team data related questions. So specific questions in relation to those 5 behaviours that the team will need to anonymously answer for us to build a detailed report on the current status of that team. Now, it's important at this stage just to share with you that this particular process is built for fully intact teams. And what I mean by that is this does have to be a group that actually work together, and the leader has to be part of that group. Ideally, it's run with anything between 5 and 10 people. We can't run it on less than 4, and running it on more than 10 can be quite complex from a time perspective. But if you're not sure about that, then reach out to us and we can give you a bit more advice and guidance on that. But ideally, it's between 4 and 10. And it should be a team that's intact and has been working together for a period of time. I would suggest 3 to 6 months as a minimum, ideally longer, because that gives you the foundation to truly understand each other well enough to be able to contribute to this report and to get an accurate assessment of your current team. When team members are genuinely transparent and honest with one another, they are able to build vulnerability-based trust. I think it's important to just stop here briefly and talk about vulnerability-based trust. It is that ability to be completely honest and frank with each other, which a lot of teams simply don't have. Ability to admit I've messed up, I've made a mistake, I need help, I need support, I'm struggling with something, whether it be a work task or something more personal. If we really step back from the conversation I'm having with you on this call now and just reflect on whether you have that in most leadership teams, my experience says that they don't. And it's not because they can't build it, it's because it isn't a focus. And it isn't a focus because nobody's helped that team understand that that's actually really required in order for a team to function together properly. On this slide, we're just taking you through understanding that element of interpersonal differences again. So again, looking at that DISC assessment. Generally, when we meet people and they speak in a team setting, our first inclination is to judge. Why are they acting that way? Why are they saying what they're saying? And depending on the culture of the organisation, our ability to judge might be deeply entrenched. But what we're trying to do in this session around trust is to develop our understanding of each other to subsequently end up in a space where we perhaps respect each other and ultimately end up appreciating and valuing that different perspective that somebody else might bring. And again, my experience is that very few teams have that naturally, and it's a behaviour and an understanding that needs to be developed through work together as a team if you're going to truly get into that space. Most teams, unfortunately, find themselves in that judging space and aren't clear on how to get away from that. So on page 4 of the report, and this is the report that you would receive if you go through the process, you would get the score for your team. And this is a summary document that scores out how your team's done. So if you remember a few slides ago, I said to you that you would be asked a series of questions about your team. You'd be asked to score them on a scale of 1 to 5, and the scores would then be pre-populated into this in an anonymous way. The low, medium and high scores are based on benchmarks set from all of the participants on this process. There's been thousands of people and hundreds of organisations have gone through it over the last however many years while you've been doing it. And so the scores are fairly accurate. And so page 4 gives you a really clear indicator of where you're doing okay and where your biggest focuses are when it comes to the actual learning and development intervention that's then delivered. You can see here on trust, and I'm going to flick onto the next screen because it's a bit easier to see, that on this page, we're taking you through the questions on page 5 that the team members were asked. So things like team members are willingly apologise to one another, and this particular group scored themselves 2.8 on that, right down to 2.3 on team members acknowledge their weaknesses to one another. And so we're building a really clear picture of the levels of trust that sit within an organisation, but we're doing that in an anonymous and safe way. And again here, we give you clear insight into how the team sees itself. So here it says the teams are unguarded and genuine with one another. This is another one of the questions from the team survey. And you can see in this particular example, 3 people felt that that rarely happened, and 3 people felt that that sometimes happened. And you get some bespoke narrative that gives participants a good grounding as to what this information is telling you. There'll be a series of these questions on that page 6. When we move forward to page 8, we give you a copy of the DISC model, and you can see it on the screen here. DISC is made up of 4 different key personality styles, D, I, S, and C, and they stand for dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. And what you will end up with here is a map of your individuals within your organisation, so that they can understand the core characteristics of those different behaviour types, and start to build an appreciation for them, and start to value them, hopefully, ultimately. You'll also get on page 8 a personalised narrative, and everybody gets this bespoke narrative that's been built based on your answers to your DISC assessment that helps you understand your personality type, how it influences your behaviours at work, where it might be helping you and potentially where it might be hindering you. And when we do the facilitation, we spend time reviewing these as a collective and talking these through so that we have a strong understanding of each other. You'll get a team map, which we can print off as a poster, which you can then take back to the organisation. And again, the core characteristics of those particular behaviours are built into that particular team map. On the final page then, as we look at trust, we start to look at another set of questions that were asked. There would be more trust on a team if people, and we gave them a series of statements that they could answer. And you can see there in this particular team, 5 people felt the team would be more trust if people reduced the amount of gossiping, down to 1 person who felt they needed to spend more time together. So again, what we're doing is we're building a clear picture from a trust perspective of what's right in this team and what's working well, and potentially where the opportunities are. When there's trust, team members are able to engage in unfiltered, constructive debates of ideas. And that brings us on to that second behaviour, which is conflict. Now, conflict's really important in a team setting. I feel really passionately about this. Conflict, in my honest view, is desperately needed more in organisations. The ability to conflict productively together to get to the best possible answers to the problems that each individual business solves is really, really crucial. But without work on this, invariably, people's concerns about the impact of conflict really prevent those high quality debates. And you can see on the screen here, based on your DISC style, what typical healthy and unhealthy behaviours you might exhibit or display in a conflict setting. Might be worth you pressing pause for a second and having a look at these yourself and just getting a sense of which ones really speak to you. That give you a bit of an indication of your DISC style, but it would also give you an indication of how you contribute to a team from a conflict perspective. And there it is there in a slightly bigger version so that you can press the pause button and go through that. When team members are able to offer opinions and debate ideas, they will be more likely to commit to decisions. And that leads us then on to that third behaviour. So we've built trust, or we've started to work on building trust. We've talked about how to conflict. And those 2 sessions typically would take up probably 50% of the time that you would invest into this particular process. And I'll talk at the end about how long this process normally takes. Because they are the core foundations of the model. The other 3 are really important, but without the first 2, you won't really get anywhere. But now we're going to talk a little bit about commitment. So, on commitment, you can see there, I sometimes don't buy into the team's discussions because, again, another set of these questions that we've asked as part of the teamwork assessment. You can see the options that the team would have. We're not clear on priorities. Decisions are counter to my personal goals. I don't trust my team to follow through. These are all the opportunities or the options the team are given, and they are then asked to score that in an anonymised way to give us a really clear understanding of the commitment levels across the team on the day that we're going through the process. When everyone is committed to a clear plan of action, they will be more willing to hold one another accountable. I've only given you a very small snapshot yet there in the interest of time of some of the questions that would be asked in that commitment section to understand commitment fully in your team. But let's briefly look again as well at accountability to give you an indication of what's asked there. And you can see, again, our ability to hold one another accountable could improve if we challenge one another too, all the way from 5 people feeling that it's call one another on unproductive behaviours down to 1 person who felt that we should follow through on personal commitments. So I've hopefully shown you throughout those 4 different sections the different types of questions and the different phraseology that's used to build this assessment. And I can share with you separately a copy of a sample report which would give you all of the questions to help you build a better understanding. A team ensures its attention is focused on results by making results clear and rewarding only those behaviours and actions that contributes to those results. A functional team must make the collective results of the group more important to each individual than individual members' goals. This is a really interesting point. Every time I run this with a senior leadership team, I always get some inconsistency within the group where individuals are confused about where their priority lies and which team they actually work for. And invariably, the issue is that the leaders within that group perceive that their affinity or their responsibility or their allegiance sits with the team that works for them, not the leadership team that they sit inside. And this section is really designed to help bring to life that opportunity and that problem. If you've never done work on this, it probably does exist in your organisation. There probably are people in your team that think that their responsibility is truly to their team that work for them rather than the leadership team that they're in. And that's one of the reasons why you might be not getting the results that you're looking for. So again, just a quick brief look at the results element. We can see here one of the pages of the report, page 33. Some distractions that keep us from focusing on results are more emphasis on personal goals than team goals. 4 people felt that was an opportunity for this team, down to 1 person felt that the goals were quite vague or shifted. And so again, I think there's around 20 questions for each one of the behaviours, 15 to 20 questions that the teams need to answer. They're quite quick. It can be done pretty quickly. But it builds a really clear picture of those behaviours and how the team that's going through the process really reacts to those behaviours currently and how they score ultimately, as we saw back a few slides ago. The report then highlights some of the areas that the team that recognises as the team's strengths, and you can see that here on page 35. So it's picked out from the commitments, results and conflict sections that some areas where the team seems to be doing better than the average or better than the kind of average of the organisations that have delivered this process before, or better than average for this particular team's assessment. And you can see the questions there. Team members leave meetings confident that everyone is committed to the decisions that were agreed upon. And positively, almost 4 usually would indicate that usually people feel that's the case. And then we look to highlight some of the opportunities and challenges. So on here you can see that from results, team members value collective success more than individual achievement is down to 1.8. And from the accountability level, team members offer unprovoked constructive feedback to one another is down at a 2. So the report really highlights the areas where the team is doing really well and where it needs to put its focus if it's going to score better, if a reassessment is to be completed at an agreed time further down the line. It's an all-in-one program, 7 modules, a quick intro into those 5 behaviours and a summary. My personal experience of this is it's not possible to do this in under 2 days. It's a 2-day workshop. It's pretty intense. It can be quite emotional as well. It really does highlight the dysfunction within an organisation, or specifically within a team. And it does take a level of knowledge and experience to facilitate this. I'll take you through in a minute the different options you've got in terms of facilitating this particular process. If you're thinking about doing it through your internal learning and development team, that's fine. You can do that. You just need to be really, really clear about the very personal information that teams are likely to share during this particular program, and whether that's appropriate for an internal learning and development expert to be doing that, and how it might impact on the dynamics on the day. There's a facilitation kit that you can purchase, all 7 modules, 40 minutes worth of videos, handouts, podcasts, all kind of stuff that can be purchased for those that want to facilitate themselves. Obviously, we have the facilitation kits ourselves, and we're accredited in this process and have been delivering it for some time. So you've really got 2 options in essence. Reach out to us and we can talk to you about how we could run the process for you. Or if you've got internal HR or learning and development specifically, it could be an option for you to do it yourselves. I would suggest it's probably worth a chat with us before going down that route to just decide what's the best approach and what's going to give you the best possible outcome for the team or teams that you intend to take through the process. Another aspect of this is a progress report. So the 40-odd page report that we run at the start of the program to deliver that 2-day workshop can in essence be repeated. The participants don't have to repeat the DISC element, but they do repeat the team behaviours aspect of the report. And what that allows us to do is to compare and contrast the progress, hopefully, that team has made during that time window that's been agreed. I'd normally suggest 6 months as a reasonable period of time for a leadership team to work on these behaviours together. And there's lots of activities and actions that we can work on with you during that period of time to really accelerate your progress. But again, that's a conversation for another day. Once you've decided whether this is a process for you, we can talk more about tailoring it to your specific needs. So it's a graphical report and it details progress since the last session. It expanded explanations of areas of greatest improvement. It gives you an action plan and a few appendices as well. There's also an annotated team report for those that are thinking about running this yourselves. And the annotated team report gives you tips on interpreting the score, expanded explanations on content and resources for additional information. It also gives you indications on the scoring levels for the organisation and how they relate to other teams that have done this process over the years. And you can see there it offers you a clear interpretation of the scoring. On the annotated report, it tells you what percentage you are in relation to other users. So it might say your trust levels are in the top 10% bracket, for example. We don't share that in the standardized report, but sometimes when you're facilitating this and teams might be getting quite down on themselves because their trust scores or conflict scores are really poor, it can be useful for a facilitator to have access to that kind of information, to just reassure them that actually, whilst they are dysfunctional, the reality is that's quite normal at this stage of the process. And you can see it there through the normative data scoring on the right. So it's giving you the normative scores, sorry, not percentages, the normative scores based on those responses. So it's actually telling you where teams typically score to just give you a better sense of how a team scores and how serious the problem is that you've identified, or alternatively, how positive the score that you've seen is. A little bit more information there about the annotated report. I'm not going to go through that in more detail. It's just useful for anybody that does want to facilitate. You can see that you get quite a lot of high quality, personalised content to really help you with the delivery of the process. And again, it will take you through those areas of strength and areas of disagreement where the scores vary significantly so that they can be better understood. So the outcomes then from the whole process is it provides the emotional grounding for teams to establish strong bonds and commitment, creates a contract among team members about how the team will succeed, and it gives the team the information they'll need to follow through on a team development plan. My details are on the screen there. It would be lovely to connect with you either on LinkedIn or reach out via an email. In terms of next steps, if you've listened to this today and are more curious, we can provide, as I said earlier, we can provide sample documents so you can get a better look at the actual report that you receive as part of the process. And we're always open to just an initial coffee and chat on a Teams call to just talk more about how this process might support your team's development. Hopefully that's been useful for you. Maybe you'll reach out to us in the near future. Thanks for listening and take care.